Not many people know this, but in the late 90s, there were 5 brothers who were kept locked in their apartment for their entire lives by their father, and their only understanding of the outside world came from movies they watched, which they elaborately remade using homemade costumes and props. So this all starts in the late 80s when a woman named Suzanne was on a backpacking trip in Peru, and she fell in love with a man named Oscar Angulo. They got married and stayed in Peru and started having children. Eventually, in the early 90s, they moved back to the United States to New York City. At this point, Suzanne started to realize that her husband wasn't exactly what he made himself out to be in the early days of free love and adventure. He was actually a deeply paranoid and controlling man. Oscar thought the world outside was dangerous and scary and deadly, and so he did not let his children leave the house ever from the time that they were babies, and he rarely let his wife leave to do things like shopping and buying school supplies. So cut to years later, and the siblings are all teenagers, and they've never stepped foot outside of their cramped New York City apartment. However, their father did allow them to watch movies because he was a huge film buff, and so he would rent a bunch of them and bring them back for his sons to watch. Naturally, the brothers became absolutely obsessed with movies because they were really their only form of entertainment and also their only peek into what the outside world was like. So they would watch movies over and over again, hundreds of times, memorizing lines and entire speeches from them and reciting them to each other. And then they would create elaborate costumes from household items of their favorite characters and wear them around the house. And eventually they started transcribing the entire scripts from movies and then acting them out as plays. At some point, Oscar brought home a video camera, and then the brothers started elaborately shooting remakes of their favorite movies using these homemade costumes and homemade props that they made out of cardboard and paper. But despite this deep and passionate love for movies that the brothers had developed, life at home was still not good. Their father, Oscar, was very abusive and controlling. He hurt their mother and them, and they were getting sick of it. So one day, while the father and the mother were out at the store, the more adventurous brother, Mukunda, he staged an escape. He broke out of the apartment and went running through the streets of New York. But because he didn't want his father to recognize him if they accidentally crossed paths, Mukunda put on a homemade Michael Myers mask that he created for a remake of Halloween that they shot. So he's running around the streets of New York City with a Michael Myers mask on. Eventually, people became concerned and called the police, and he was arrested. After being arrested, Mukunda explained everything to the police. They came to the house. They took the kids out. They said, you can't keep these kids locked up in here anymore. They temporarily placed them all in foster care. And eventually they went back and lived with their parents again. But from that point on, they were no longer being kept prisoner inside of their apartment. In 2010, during one of their excursions out into the city that was now common, the brothers ran into a documentary filmmaker named Crystal Moselle, and she was taken by them in their story. And she ended up making a documentary about them called The Wolf Pack, which came out in 2015 and documents everything about their lives. In the years since, all the siblings have grown up and moved out of the house, and they still have a close relationship with their mother, but they don't speak to Oscar anymore.